All right, hello everyone, and welcome to another Tuesday evening with me here. Today, as you know, we're going through this Pesach period, and we're going to go over, as usual, what we're doing in the morning lesson. So this is kind of prepare us and rev us up for tomorrow's morning lesson. All right, also, these excerpts are pretty special as we're going through this phase called Pesach in corporeality, right, according to the calendar. But however, these are things we also need to live internally. So having a look at these articles, going over them, will also get us into that same kind of wavelength as to what the Kabbalists are talking about when they talk about the exile in Egypt according to the spiritual realm, the inner world of a person. All right, so let's get smashing as usual. And if you guys got any questions, just shoot them through and we'll try to nail them as best we can. But what we'll probably be doing is going through these excerpts and we'll find the answers together. And that's the beautiful thing about the articles of Rabash. All right, so we're going to start from excerpt number 13, and the topic on that is exile in Egypt. What is exile? It is that he is under the rule of self-love and cannot work for the sake of the Creator. When is self-love considered exile? It is only when he wants to emerge from this control because he suffers from not being able to do anything for the sake of the Creator. All right, so let's read this again. This is really nice because in just 2 sentences, he nails it. All right, so exile isn't something like I feel bad in the world or I'm lost in the world or whatever. It's aimed at a specific concept. So what is exile? It is that he's under the rule of self-love and cannot work for the sake of the Creator. When is self-love considered exile? It's only when he wants to emerge from this control because he suffers from not being able to do anything for the sake of the Creator. All right, so we understand we're under the control of self-love. We can't bestow to the Creator, and there's nothing I can do about it, and that's why I'm suffering. Right, that is called exile. Very plain, very simple. Right? I don't know why Hollywood has to make a dozen movies about the exile. It's just very simple. I'm trying to get spiritual, and I understand I'm in my self-love and egoistic nature. Well, I want to get out of it, and I can't get out of it, so I'm in a bit of a drama, and that's called the exile in Egypt. All right, so that is the suffering. But, joking aside, the reason it's made such a fuss about is that it's the beginning of the spiritual path, right? It's like from the exile of Egypt. When you exit Egypt, you start your spiritual journey. So on the one hand, he really does a great job in summarizing what the exile in Egypt means. On the other hand, it's a really juicy topic because this is where you go through everything before and during your entry into spirituality, into that higher level of consciousness. So it sounds like a corporeal kind of story, and with all the stories around it, how they ended up there, how they developed there, how they lived there, how they got out of there, and so forth. Despite the fact that it's all one big juicy story, the reason it is so juicy is because that's where the majority of this inner discernments and everything, all this turmoil is happening. All right. So let's carry on with item number 14. We should know that the exile he feels, when he says he, it's anybody who's studying the wisdom of Kabbalah and feels that they're in this state, right? So there is no he or she in spirituality, it's just the way that they write it. So we should know that the exile he feels, that he is in exile, is measured not by the exile, but by the sensation of bad and suffering that he suffers because he is in exile. Then, when he is tormented because he's under the rule of oppressors and he must do all that they demand of him, and he has no right to do what he wants, but he must serve and carry out all that the nations of the world in his body demand. And he is powerless to betray them. To the extent of the pain he feels and his desire to escape them, to that extent, he can enjoy the redemption. All right, let's go over that one more time. And we should know that the exile he feels, that he is in exile, is measured not by the exile, but by the sensation of bad and suffering that he suffers because he is in exile. So this state of exile must be very clear for a person, right? After a lot of efforts, can he feel like he is in exile? Because in order for me to feel like I'm in exile, I've got to have a clear-cut goal, and I have to be, I have to have done everything to attain what I wanted to attain and couldn't get anywhere, right? So I've done everything I can. I've done all the efforts, whatever I could do, and I'm still not getting out of, I'm not being able to get out of my egoism, my self-love, self-concern. And we want to, on the other hand, want to get out of it. We want to, kind of get out of the slavery, because this is our daily life, isn't it, right? We're slaving for our desire to receive. So we're running every day to fulfill all kinds of corporeal desires. And what do we really end up with at the end of the day? you're just going to end up dead. Sounds much better if I just chill out and relax. Okay. However, though, our desire to receive doesn't let us. We're just jumping up and down. Now we've got wars happening, and probably more wars are on the way. Okay, why? Because humanity, unfortunately, is a bit stupidly stubborn. So it takes time for us to learn. So a person needs a lot of effort to understand that he is in exile, and there's nothing he can do against his desire to receive for himself. He's completely governed by it, ruled by it, doesn't get a breather from it, and that's it. So once he's under that sensation, he's got something called suffering. Okay, that's the suffering that he's feeling in exile. Then when he's tormented, because he is under the rule of oppressors, which is the Pharaoh, and he must do, Pharaoh is our desire to receive for ourselves, right? Our egoism, that thing inside of us that's always running around for pleasure and for self-benefit. Then when he's tormented because he's under the rule of oppressors, and he must do all that they demand of him, and he has no right to do what he wants, but he must serve and carry out all that the nations of the world in his body demand. And he's powerless to betray them. To the extent of the pain he feels and his desire to escape them, to that extent he can enjoy the redemption. Okay, so the amount of actually suffering from the lack of spirituality, at the end of the day, works in our favor. Because according to the greater the vessel that we have, the bigger the desire that I have. Because I'm doing all that effort and not getting anywhere, it's also building in me a lot of desire. And the bigger the desire, the greater the pleasure. So all of this is actually working in our favor. The Creator could have easily created us all in bestowal, and that's it, without any dramas and this and that. But then you don't get any pleasure from it. In life as well, we get pleasure from achievements. Okay? So what have you achieved? Right? So if you're an achiever, as they say in the West, right? So you get this, pumped up ego, like I go get stuff, I'm a go-getter kind of thing. So that's the pleasure you get, right? That's all. So the bigger you've got, the bigger your goal is, the bigger your desire is, the more fulfillment you have. So smaller desires, smaller pleasures, bigger desires, bigger pleasures. So the exile in Egypt, which is suffering from lack of spirituality, the more it's kind of extended, it sounds good, because kind of like it needs to come to this full measure. And that full measure is really your limit, your border, right? Beyond this, I can't tolerate this anymore, right? And that limit is the time when your vessel is fit for that pleasure. And then that is the time for redemption. Then you can actually attain it. Okay, so it takes a bit of process. And that process, brings the person to this sensation of suffering in terms of spirituality, obviously. So once again, suffering is not our corporeal life. It's nothing to do with any of our sufferings in corporeal life. So keep your corporeality out of your spirituality when it comes to determining what exactly the suffering is, what exactly the pleasure is, what exactly the goal is. Okay, so that's really important, to measure everything according to your goal and not according to just how you feel good or bad. Okay, so this is excerpt number 15 from Rabash's article number 14. As Baal Islam explained, the exile in Egypt was in order to obtain the vessels of the Egyptians, but it was only to borrow and later to return them to them. He interpreted that this matter of the Creator saying to Abraham, your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, was a guarantee of the inheritance. This means that they would have a need to receive the abundance from the Creator, since wanting to come out of the enslavement of the Egyptians can be only through the help of a holy soul. Then they will need the Creator's help each time, and from this they will have a need to draw higher degrees. Let's read that once again. So this is like, I hope you guys know about the story between Abraham, the patriarch, and the Creator, right? So it's related to that. As Baal Islam explained, the exile in Egypt was in order to obtain the vessels of the Egyptians, the desires of the Egyptians. But it was only to borrow them and later to return it to them. He interpreted that this matter of the Creator saying to Abraham, your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, was a guarantee of the inheritance. So they had to go through this slavery, right? They had to go through this suffering, this exile. Why? Because if you don't go through heavy stuff, you don't really push yourself to something better, right? Because what's human nature? Human nature is always striving for pleasure or running away from suffering. So it's the same thing here. So they went into Egypt. When they went into Egypt, they were running away from suffering, from drought and the lack of food in the land of Israel, right? So from Israel, Joseph and his brother descended to Egypt because they were going through drought and all kinds of lack of food, scarcity there. And then they spent years, about nearly, it was supposed to be 400 years, but it was less. So they spent many years in Egypt. And what are they doing in Egypt? Obviously, they're living a good life, but they're studying spirituality. And the whole concept we need to relate to is the good life that they're talking about in the books is about spirituality. So they went into Egypt, they went in with a good desire to receive, to attain spirituality. So they had a lot of force to study and to really advance. This is why their life was initially really good in Egypt, right? They had this energy to study, a good positive attitude. Yeah, let's go and do it. That kind of stuff. And as they studied more and more, they understood that, listen, we're studying, but it's like we're going backwards. We're not attaining spirituality. We don't really have a desire for this. It's, all the weaknesses that a person reveals on the path. So they needed these desires of the Egyptians to borrow them, just to study for yourself, and then like to get spirituality for yourself. And then this meant that they would have a need to receive the abundance from the Creator, since wanting to come out of the enslavement of the Egyptians can be only through the help of a holy soul. So they study, and they start by studying for themselves. So they've got a lot of energy. And as they study, they realize they need to study for the sake of the Creator. And that's when the problems start. All of a sudden, they need to now change the whole perspective. So instead of trying to attain spirituality for themselves in advance, they say, well, we've got to bestow to the Creator. So all of a sudden, the study becomes, well, wait a minute, it's not like what I signed up for. All right. So it starts like dawning on them what reality of bestowal is. But they don't leave, you see, they keep studying. And as they study more and more, they want to advance and advance. They see that it's just not possible to go there. So on the one hand, they're getting weak because, it's draining. On the other hand, they're still studying. They're not leaving the path, right? They're moving forward. So they're left in this dilemma. But this dilemma and this feeling of suffering that they can't get out of this desire to receive, it's like everything they do is for their self-benefit and they can't, get out of it. This suffering that they're unable to free themselves from, this nature, allows them to grow a good, big, chunky vessel, which they can get light in. All right. And that's how the Creator helps. So they come to a point where, that's it. They've done everything. And then the Creator's help comes along. And that's what it means to get a soul. So the person actually has the ability now by the hand of the Creator, obviously. That's the only miracle there is in life, by the way, the ability to have your nature changed from reception to bestowal. And that change is done by the Creator's help. Okay, and that's actually done on every degree. So Egypt, this is why also Egypt is a very juicy topic, because it's like you go through this in every step, right? Because you attain one level in spirituality, then your next level of coarseness, your egoism and self-love start to be seen, and it emerges. And once it emerges, you feel like you're back in Egypt, right? You're back under the control of that desire to receive for yourself again. So it's like going through the same kind of procedure, but it's obviously not the same kind of procedure, but it's similar because you're still feeling exile, but you're working now with a bigger vessel, a bigger egoism. Why? Well, how's that helpful? Well, because the bigger your ego is, the more attainment you can have. Why? Because you got to cover it more with bestowal. If I have a little ego, okay, I'm like a little kid or a little animal. Okay, just don't have an ego. I just roam around the planet. I eat when I'm hungry. I sleep when I need to sleep, and that's it. And I breed when I need to breed. That's it. And then they end up dead, right? So there's not a lot of ego there. Very, very small. Not even considered an ego. So in order for a person to be really conscious and at a high level, like the consciousness of the creator, to be at the degree of the creator at that level, he needs to have the same kind of oppositeness to the creator. So if the creator is perfection, humanity has to reveal how opposite it is to perfection. But on top of that, you can build perfection. So, the worse you are, the higher you get. Doesn't really make common sense, but we're studying spirituality. So it is not common sense. Okay, it is above common sense, above our mind. So logic tells us the less, the purer you are, the higher attainment you should have. But no, the more egoistic you are, and as you study spirituality, you cover it more with bestowal, the higher you get. Right. So egoism is necessary for a person to elevate oneself in life too. In this world as well, if you take a look at life, you will see that all the successful people are the most egoistic ones. Right? They're the real terrible people in the world. But what do? The common people, they look up to them. They go, wow, what a successful person. But they're the most egoist, the most despicable people on the planet, but we value it. Why? Because they've made something from themselves. And that's how egoism works. So this is how we see it in this world as well. And it's like the creator likes it. Think about it. It's like the creator likes bad people because they're the ones that seem to succeed. Right? If you take a look at life, they're the ones that seem to succeed. And this is how it pans out. So the bigger your ego, the potential that you have to be great is much higher. Okay, obviously here we're talking about spiritual development. So nothing to do about, you don't need to boost your ego in corporeality. But the Egyptians are necessary. This is why we, in the wisdom of Kabbalah as well, as students of the authentic wisdom of Kabbalah, have to also engage in our corporeal life as well. So we all have a family, we've got family, kids, work. We engage in life just like everybody else does. And on top of that, we add spirituality. By adding spirituality, you can also understand what you're going through in corporeality. And because a lot of people don't understand that, this is why we get a lot of violence, depression, wars, all kinds of bad things happen in life, because you can't balance your spiritual side with what you're doing in your corporeal side. All right, so if that doesn't really balance out, you're going to have a lot of problems. This is why divorce rates are all-time high, and they will get worse, right? They will get worse. We'll have more wars, more conflicts, and all this kind of trouble in the world, only because we humans don't know how to balance our egoistic side with the opposite, which is bestow. Right? If we knew that, we wouldn't be in such a mess. So mixing with the Egyptians was necessary. It allows the person to develop as well. And you want to develop on your corporeal and spiritual sides at the same time as well. With life, you're growing with life and not running away from it to some mountaintop. The Ari says that the exile in Egypt was that the view of holiness was in exile. So exile means, once again, that we are far away from the Creator, disconnected. This means that the Klippah of Egypt ruled over the people of Israel. We should interpret that the people of Israel means that the whole nation wanted to work for the sake of the Creator and not for their own sake. As it is known that Israel means Yashar El, straight to the Creator, meaning everything for the Creator. The governance of Pharaoh is the opposite, to work only for one's own sake. For this reason, the view of holiness means that we must work for the sake of the Creator, meaning to bestow. This discernment was in exile under the rule of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, when Mitzrayim, Egypt, has the letters Metzar Yam, narrow sea. And it is known that narrow means scarce in Hasadim, which is mercy. All right. So it's just explaining that a little bit more for us. If there are any questions, just drop them through. Now, there's one from Ingrid. Why does a creature need to be a receptor from the Creator? Can he be independent? Well, that's the whole idea. That's the whole idea. Look, we're created as a desire to receive pleasure, right? Because the Creator wants to bestow to us. But it doesn't mean we have to be a slave to the desire to receive. That's the whole idea. The Creator doesn't want us to be a slave either. The Creator wants us to use our nature in such a way that He's using His nature, which means to be free from self-benefit. You see, the more self-benefit I have, actually, the less independent I am. Because in order for me to fulfill my desires, I need people around. Right? How am I going to fulfill my desires? I need to use people, don't I? How do I get what I want in life? By using other people. So the more egoistic I am, the more dependent on them. I become more dependent. So I don't have any freedom. I can only be free if I'm above my desire to receive. Right? So I'm not in its control. So I don't care about the desire to receive because it's not important. What's important is to bestow to the Creator. Why? How would I come to such a conclusion? Because if you feel the Creator and if you feel His relationship towards you as loving and bestowing, you want to reciprocate. Then you're using your desire to receive and fulfilling it because He wants to bestow, not because you want to get something, but because He wants to bestow. So you're actually doing the Creator a favor. If you think about it, because think about it for a moment, right? If you're above your desire to receive, you're completely independent, right? So even if you see the Creator wants to give you something, because you're independent of it, you can always say, listen, man, no, not today, thank you. Okay. But, right, being above that is also giving you a sensation of bestowal. And bestowal is loving and giving, right? That's the sensation you're living in when you're above your desire to receive. And then you understand what the Creator wants to do. So you want to oblige and reciprocate. So He wants to give, you want to say, sure. Why? Because it's going to make Him happy. That's the point when you're independent. It's like the Creator is more dependent on us than we're dependent on Him. Obviously, we're very much dependent on the Creator, but think of it as a concept, right? In our development, we're 100% dependent on the Creator. That's for sure. Just like a baby is dependent on the mother, right? No family, that baby is not going to grow. Okay, so the baby is completely dependent. But imagine yourself at the level of the Creator. With what you've attained, you're absolutely independent. But with also what you've attained, you don't want to be independent. Why? Because now you're clothed with love and bestowal. So you don't want to, you want to serve, right? You want to make the other side happy. So there's a flip in nature here, right? But independence is from the desire to receive. But when you attain bestowal, then you're under the control of bestowal. So who's really free? Right? So maybe being free is not the idea, but maybe being interdependent and loving it is the idea. Huh? Right? So that's a whole different perspective. Okay. Also, right, when you're married to someone you love, you don't really want to feel like you're independent. You want to feel like you're always intertwined. Why? Because there's love between you. Okay, this is the 21st century. It's, a bit of a far-fetched story. Okay. Since we don't have any, prince on a white horse and a Snow White anywhere, right? So this romantic picture is a bit rare for the 21st century, but think of it as a concept. The more you love someone, the more you want to be intertwined. Right? So that on the one hand, it's more limiting, but you're liking it, you enjoy it. All right. Well, I hope you guys do. Anyway, let's take a look at excerpt number 17. When one properly sanctifies the point in the heart within him, he begins to enter the exile in Egypt. At that time, he begins to see each time how far he is from the act of bestowal. Then, kelim, or vessels from within him, meaning deficiencies which the Creator will later be able to fill. Let's read that again. When one properly sanctifies the point in the heart within him. So when one starts working properly with directing himself or herself to the Creator, right? Once we start working properly, seriously, with our inclination towards spirituality, then he or she obviously begins to enter the exile in Egypt. What does that really mean? Well, for me to work properly with my dot in the heart, I also need the counterpart. It's my egoism, right? So I need to be like kind of walking on two legs here. So once I clarify that work, then I start to understand that the more I do stuff, I'm going to realize that I'm just doing it for me. Right? It's all about me. And that's becoming clearer and clearer and clearer. And then it becomes, like a tipping point. At that time, he begins to see each time how far he is from the act of bestowal. So once again, look how nicely he's saying, the more I study, the more I work, trying to get spiritual, I begin to see how far I am from bestowal. It should be the opposite. The more I should work, the more I work, I should feel closer, right? That's common sense, okay? Once again, we can't go with common sense in spirituality because we're going against our nature. So the more I try to go into bestowal, the more I realize that I'm egoistic. The more I see myself as an egoist, the more I see myself as not having the capacity to do anything in order to bestow. All right, then kelim from within him, meaning deficiencies, which the Creator will later be able to fill. So why are they important? Well, like I said a minute ago, right? The more egoistic you are, the more potential you have to go up, because you're going to have to fill those in order to bestow later on. So first of all, the Creator is showing us the truth. And the truth is that we are completely swamped by our egoistic desire to receive pleasure for our personal benefit. The more I see that, it's not just seeing it. I'm seeing it, and also what's accompanying me is the feeling that this attribute is causing me grief. Okay? Because if you didn't see it was causing you dramas, you'd never want to get rid of it, right? So on the one hand, what does it mean to see that I'm egoistic? It means I'm actually, because of my ego, I'm getting damaged here. I'm shooting myself in the foot all the time. So seeing that, gives me the motivation to want to run away from it and to go against it. So these things we have to work with together, because normally a person, if you look at many people out there on the street, they don't really suffer because of their egoism, or they don't relate their suffering to their egoism, right? They always relate their suffering to other people on the planet. My neighbor did this, my wife did that, my boyfriend did this, my girlfriend did that, and all this kind of stuff. My boss, I mean, we love the boss. So he's always relating the problems to somebody else. He or she is never looking down inside to understand how life is getting worse and worse because of their egoism, their desire to receive for themselves. So this lack of vision doesn't allow the person to feel that state. So, but only a person who's studying spirituality, he or she has a certain goal, wants to get to bestowal, sees that as possible, and yeah, sounds good initially, at least initially, sounds good, and is aiming for it. But as they work for it, they begin to discover how it is against our nature. So, there are a few dramatic situations here, but we want to come to see the truth, and that's what the wisdom of Kabbalah is, the wisdom of truth. So the benefit in the exile was the feeling that the will to receive is a sin. Okay, what does it mean to be in a sin? Sin means I'm away from the Creator, I'm distant from the Creator, right? It's not like the religious think about what a sin is. A sin is, I have an opportunity to get close to the Creator and I'm not using the opportunity, all right? But even that a person has to feel. We also have to go through these sensations as well. Otherwise, we can't come to a discernment. So all of these things, that my egoism is causing me all this suffering, and I begin to feel that this is it, this is the sin. And this is the reason to decide that there is no other choice but to try and acquire vessels of bestowal. So as you can see, look, we're coming to the vessels of bestowal, trying to escape suffering. So this is all, as you can see in Egypt, we're still in our egoistic work format. Okay, so we want to get out of this. We're not in bestowal yet, right? So our whole concept is to escape from our egoism because we see it's causing us harm. This is the meaning of the Creator's answer to Abraham, the patriarch, about his request for guarantees for the inheritance of the land. Know for certain that your seed, etc., and they shall afflict them, etc. Through the exile, they would come to discover that the hair's breadth is a sin, and then they would accept the real work in order to detach themselves from the sin. Okay. So in Egypt, we're going through all this stuff in order to take upon ourselves the real work. Okay, and that's it. Now, because we don't see spirituality up and running in Egypt, the only way to move forward into spirituality is try to escape from the bad. Right? Remember, life pushes us in two ways. I'm either running away from suffering or I'm running towards pleasure. But spirituality and spiritual pleasure, we don't see in Egypt. So the Creator is giving us a rough time so that we can understand that our egoism is the problem, and that's causing us all the problems in life. So we can want to escape the evil, which is Egypt, which is our ego, our egoism. And if we suffer enough, because if you suffer enough from something, you'll do anything to get out of it, right? Even jump into the Dead Sea, as they've done, or the Red Sea, sorry. So our suffering in our egoism must be that great that we just like, get us out of here, so we can move forward. In the state of Lolishma, a person feels that he is regarded as Israel. But when a person wants to begin the work of bestowal, meaning to have kelim to receive inner light, when he wants to emerge from self-love, then he comes into the exile in Egypt. Right, so remember, before they came into Egypt, right, they were still doing the spiritual work. It just, the focus just wasn't on connecting. Right, remember, the sons of Israel, they were doing the spiritual work since Abraham. So it's nothing new. And the sons of Jacob, well, they're doing spiritual work. It's not like they're detached from spiritual, what spirituality is. Jacob is the middle line. So he is like, a foundation. So his sons are aware. And Joseph, though, is the guy who understands what they lack, and they lack that connection. So this is going into the Egypt, right? So we want to start connecting. So as they go into Egypt, they want to work, they want to start connecting. What happens? A person sees how he is remote from attention with the Creator in equivalence of form. Instead, whether in mind or in heart, the Klippa of Egypt governs. So they see they can't connect. They don't have any inclination to connect, and they don't want to connect. So their desire to receive still rules them. In that state, he sees that he is far from being Israel. Instead, he's in a state of Jacob, a state of katnut, from the words ekev and sof. In other words, he is in utter lowliness, seeing that each day he is further from the Creator and has no grip on holiness or sanctity. This is called the exile in Egypt. All right, so it takes day-to-day suffering. Day-to-day study. Sorry, not day-to-day suffering. We're studying every day, right? Study. And as we study, we begin to understand that we're in exile, and that's the suffering, that we can't move forward. We've got no grip on spirituality whatsoever. And that is the process of going through the exile in Egypt. We cannot come to bestow. Let's read. Are there any questions anymore? No? Okay, that's good. When the people of Israel were in exile in Egypt and were under the governance of Pharaoh, king of Metzariyam, narrow sea, and wanted to emerge from his governance, they could not. It was still unclear to them what it means to work in order to bestow and not for one's own sake. Although they wanted to work for the sake of the Creator, they saw that they could not yet. So they saw they could not. Yet, they always had excuses as to why they cannot aim in order to bestow. And they did not feel that they were so far from the Creator. Right, so that's also a part of the study. Until things become clear to a person, they have to go through this long process called Egypt. So during the path, we have a lot of blurry moments. In fact, the whole spiritual path is all, blurry, then clear, blurry, clear. So it's all in every degree. But Egypt also, because there's nothing to hold on to something spiritual in Egypt. You're like always confused. You never really can place yourself and say, yeah, that's right. So a lot of times people ask, where am I making a mistake? Because you can't really see where you're making a mistake. You can't really also see what you're doing right. Nothing is clear. Nothing is, 100%. So it can be a bit of a, because it's the longest stretch of the road. That preparation period is a long stretch. So sometimes because of that, a lot of people get, stressed about it. They feel like they can't do it. They feel like they want to go. they get tired with it and so on. And they're right, everybody has their own justification, obviously, but because it's a long stretch and a person has to put all the efforts that he or she can, because until you put all your effort, you can't really come to a clear understanding that this is not going to happen by your force. So this is why, it really depends on the effort of the individual and the stubbornness of the individual so they don't leave the path. That's really, really important. And if they understand the process, though, if a person, is always in the articles and is reading and going over them, like we're doing it on Tuesday, and what happens is you begin to understand and get used to the path. So you're constantly working on it, and then it begins to settle in that you just have to ask the Creator to get this done. And then your work becomes sharper, because then you're just left with you and your prayer, and that's it. And everything else you do with corporeal life and everything, it's kind of like on the side, because you got something on your mind and that's working, and the rest of your life in corporeality is just going with the flow while you're in the thought of what you want, and your prayer, obviously, like I said, because everything is attained by the power of a prayer. So the more you're invested in it, the more you begin to understand that only the Creator can help you out here, nobody else. Okay, so let's make this the last one, item number 21. If a person is placed under this rule, like the nations of the world, then he's in exile. Nations of the world, right? It's our worldly desires. Obviously, nothing else. We have corporeal, worldly desires and a dot in the heart, an inclination for spirituality, and that's it. There is no other desire. Then he's in exile, and then he's regarded as an idol worshiper. And then there is room for prayer that the Creator will help him out of this exile. And then it can be said, now meaning once he is in exile and regarded as an idol worshiper. An idol worshiper, right, is if I have a desire for something other than spirituality. What does it mean, right? Idol worship. I'm really going after one desire, I'm going after another desire. So if I'm going for spirituality and I have another desire, if I have another desire as well, let's say I want to get rich as well, right? I want to get spiritual and rich. Okay, that sounds good, doesn't it? Okay, but that means I'm idol worshipping. Why? Because I'm going after two gods. Do you know what I mean? So not being an idol worship means that I'm just going for spirituality, and everything else I'm arranging around my spiritual work. And if he's in that state, then there's room for prayer to the Creator, that the Creator will help him in exile. Why? Because at the end of the day, we also don't really determine our desires, do we? I mean, anything can come to your mind during the day. You could want anything and just go after it mindlessly as well. If you just track yourself and see how many times during the day you go blindly after things that you want without even thinking about it, it's just a wonder. So a person is like it's like an animal on a leash, all the time being dragged around by desires. And then it can be said, now meaning once he is in exile and regarded as an idol worshiper, it can be said, now the Creator has brought us closer to his work. Why? Because if I understand I'm going after other desires and all of a sudden I'm in idol worship, this gives me the ability to get closer to the Creator, because now I can turn to the Creator for help, to say, get me out of here, get me out of this situation. This is called the Exodus of Egypt, when all the works are for the Creator. For this reason, we relate the commandments to the memory of the Exodus from Egypt. Only then, once we have come out of the exile in Egypt, can we keep the commandments because of the Creator's commandment and not for other reasons. So like it says here, in Egypt as well, they're working for the Creator. Why does it mean that they're all working for the Creator, even in Egypt? Because even though they're in their desire to receive, they want to come to work for the Creator. And that's why, according to the intention, they're named. And then, pursuant to their study, their efforts, they will exit exile. And that's it. And they will come to bestow to the Creator. So getting out of Egypt is a priority. The quicker we do it, the better it is. The better it is for everyone, the individual, the group, and the world. But like I said, it needs to have this full measure of understanding what egoism is. And we need to clarify really what we're running away from. Okay, Bester has asked a question. Kabbalists say, don't trust yourself until your last day, until the day you die. Then is this life completely exile? Now, what they're talking about is until your desire to receive for yourself dies. All right, so as long as you've got a little bit of desire to receive for yourself left in you, it says don't trust yourself. Obviously, they're not talking about corporeal death, right? So that's very important to understand. We're just talking about inner states here. So until I come to full-on bestowal with everything I have, I can't trust myself. It's okay is asking, how does one arrange the other desires around the main spiritual desire? What actions can we make in the tent to bring us closer to the revelation of ourselves in Egypt? Well, let's go with the first question. How does one arrange the other desires around the main spiritual desire? By raising the importance of spirituality, okay? Because that's the only thing we can really do. And the only way that's going to happen is if I stick my head inside the spiritual environment. In life, we've got two environments, right? One is for my corporeal desires, that's for corporeality. So any corporeal desire, pleasure, all of that is the corporeal environment. And the second environment is for us, the group, where we study spirituality, where we can get some impressions, some motivation, some inspiration from the friends who also are inspiring for that spiritual goal. So I have to raise the importance by sticking my head into the right environment so that spirituality will be more important for me. Now, if spirituality is more important for me, then my worldly stuff that I have to deal with, like work, family, health, all kinds of stuff that you have to take care of in corporeality in order to live a proper life, like a normal life, right? According to yourself, right? Normal according to you. You have to just do it. But doing that is not a problem, right? So this is why all of us have family, kids, we all work. You see, we're not making money out of teaching Kabbalah. We're not. Everybody's got their own profession, their own jobs, and we're all taking care of family. We're living like a normal person in this world, and this is very important. So we're not on some mountaintop. We're not in some, I don't know, monastery somewhere, isolated, and just shutting myself completely up and turning my back on the world. We want to engage in life just like a regular normal person does. And from within that life, we also want to add spirituality to it. And spirituality becomes very meaningful when you have these tools around you called, work, family, kids, all this kind of stuff. Spirituality takes a meaningful kind of, it makes your spirituality more meaningful because you learn a lot from family. You learn a lot from what you're going through in life. And then you build the ability to relate everything that's going on in your corporeal life with your spiritual perspective now, which is there's none else besides him, right? So the Creator is bringing everything to me. And now, as I study more and more spirituality, I'm delving into spirituality more and more. I begin to like bring everything together onto one kind of root. Okay, and that's how we're building the whole path. So living, family, work, all this kind of stuff is not a problem for a Kabbalist. It's more like a helping hand. So we just have to organize corporeal life in the sense that it just needs to facilitate our existence like we're used to from childhood. Right? So whatever you're used to when you're kids, living, growing up in that kind of way, provide for the family the best, whatever normal it is in society, what's considered normal in society, what's considered normal for you, and then devote the rest to spirituality. Because at the end of the day, if you think about it as well, look, our corporeal life is going by just like that. All of a sudden, years go by. So you don't want to waste it, by giving it too much importance. You don't want to be slack at it, but you don't want to make that the top priority, because our corporeal life is an animate life. It's like a dog's life. You're born, you live, you die. So you just want to make sure you utilize that time period nicely. What actions can we make in the 10 to bring us closer to the revelation of ourselves in Egypt? Well, the more you try to help the friends, the more you try to connect with them, the more you try to increase and elevate the importance of the goal, the more effort you put into connecting, doing something for others, you'll begin to realize that you're just not there. You don't want to be there either. And that's Egypt. So at first, we're all excited. We want to do stuff, take on responsibility, and, nice little excited mode, like little children jumping up and down. And then as time goes on, you see, and Egypt, like I said, is it's like a long leg you got to run. It's like a stretch. So once you're in that stretch, over time, it begins to, drain a person. So then you really got to stick with the group, stick with the framework, stick with what you're doing all the time. Even this Tuesday night, right? There's only 10 of us. There's only 10 of us right now here. Okay, if you add us all up, there's only 10 of us. But I'm always maintaining Tuesday nights. Okay, why? Well, it's good for me. I'm honest, right? It's good for me. Why? Because I'm going over the excerpts. I'm beginning to, I'm delving into the material. And if we're all doing it, if we're all like 10 of us right now, we're doing it, it's good for all of us because we're all delving into something. We all want to get something from what we're studying so that we can advance. And that's attracting light onto us. So I'm keeping the framework, even though there's a few of us here. Even if there was no one here, I'd still do it. Still do it. Why? Because it helps me. It prepares me for the morning lesson. It gives me hints about what I need to go through. It gives me hints about what I have to do. And it gives me hints about how I need to evaluate what I'm going through. So all of these things are a bonus. Yeah? So the more we get into the stuff, into the material, reading, talking with the friends, asking questions about what we're going through, trying to clarify it, trying to sharpen it up, all of these things really help us out. So, yeah. So in the 10, we've got to connect, we've got to help each other more, and we also have to come together to help humanity more as well. All right, so if we all do that together with the lessons, with B'nai Baruch, we're in the lessons every morning. We take part in dissemination projects. We're helping other people as well. We're helping the friends as well. So all of that comes together and it'll begin to give you opportunities where you can start making discernments about what your ego is, how it works, how it surfaces, what you feel like you need to do with it, and so on. All right, I think we've made it nearly 9 o'clock, so I won't read something else, right? It was a pleasure being with all of you guys, as usual. So hopefully we'll be together again next Tuesday evening, God willing. Have a good week and have a good Pesach week as well. Bye-bye.